Who doesn't love the cyberpunk aesthetic? Neuromancer, The Terminator, that game with Keanu Reeves, what was that one called again? All classics of the genre. There's nothing quite like dystopian futures ruled by authoritarian governments made marginally better, or worse, depending on how you look at it, by technological marvels such as advanced cybernetics and an absurd amount of neon lighting. All kidding aside, it's the cold grittiness that's omnipresent in the genre's styling where it really makes its bones. More often than not, it uses the bleakness of its world to explore different aspects of the human condition, the potential rise of technology, what it actually means to be human to begin with, and how governments can, without any real repercussions, royally screw over the very people they're supposed to be protecting when granted unchecked power, are just some of the topics dabbled in. It's a world of excess that might seem really cool to be a part of at first glance, but is pretty horrible when you look beyond the ability to turn yourself into half a cyborg. How dark standing under a sea of neon can be is practically what makes cyberpunk cyberpunk. So, how does Jack Move work so well when it's so bright? Developed by So Romantic Studios and released in 2022, Jack Move sees the player step into the shoes of Noah Solares, a cyberdiver who handles heists with the help of her friend, hacker extraordinaire Ryder. Much of the story centers around how shadows from her and her family's past thrust her into a conflict against the tyrannical corporations that have come to run the world. A society-crippling event which wiped out all technology for a short time, known as the Dark, and a war fought through cybersplicing and hacking, created a power vacuum between the government and most powerful corporations, with the corporations quickly stepping in to take over, effectively becoming the new oppressive government in the process. As far as appearances are concerned, Jack Move is the antithesis of what has come to define the cyberpunk genre. Full of color, it's a pillar of proof that sometimes it is more than worth it to take a step back, reassess, and stylize what is known and tested in a new way. More than that, however, it can serve as a reminder that presentation is not always indicative of what can be done from a narrative or substance standpoint. So, what do I mean by that? While logically you want the theme of any piece of media to line up with the story you're trying to tell, that does not mean that there is only one presentation through which a story can be told. Most cyberpunk narratives take place in physically dour worlds because they are based around downer stories themselves. Jack Move manages to tell a thoughtful, frequently sad tale of its own while leaving the lights on. It does this without worsening or undercutting what it's trying to say, while upholding the tenets of what's expected in this sort of narrative. The tyrannical authority figures and organizations, as I just mentioned, are still here. It's still set far in the future, so far that virtual reality has become properly realized. The world is still generally a horrible place to live. The average folk have little autonomy, oftentimes turning to vigilantism and other sordid means to make ends meet, while the corporate stooges are worked to the bone. Really, all that's missing from Jack Move in comparison to other cyberpunk titles is an excess of sex and smoking. More importantly, just because the presentation is so different doesn't mean that these aspects lose any of their impact or presence. The delivery is a touch more humorous and witty in a lot of instances, but the overall crapsack nature of this world and what's going on within it comes across all the same. Additionally, there are some earnestly poignant moments to be found in the story, completely beliing what you might expect. This is cyberpunk, even if it doesn't look like it. Having maintained the expected theme, Jack Move is then free to reap the rewards afforded by this unique presentation, which is, as I'm sure you can tell by the video, an outstanding exhibition of pixel art excellency. Detailed sprites, intricate and expressive animations both in and out of combat, and a varied selection of environments are just some of what can be found. The amount of detail crammed into each of these areas is shocking. I'll let the visuals speak for themselves, but needless to say, the game looks outstanding. Said details play into the character and vibe of the world, being one that's more frenetic and sarcastic, if not more cheerful as previously noted. You can feel the bustle of the town in the way that characters mill about, and always have something to say. I can't get enough of these portraits either. They're so goofy in all the right ways. That is what makes Jack Move so impressive. All of this is only possible because it was brave enough to give you the best of both worlds. Gorgeous visuals that impart a more light-hearted sense that still manage to serve as host to the type of story that makes the genre so great. I wish more media would be willing to contradict the norm in the way that So Romantic were willing to here. On paper, does it make sense to construct a cyberpunk environment in this way? No, absolutely not. but once realized, you're left with a thoroughly unique experience that can stand up with anything else you might be exposed to, and one that I personally couldn't get enough of. It's a shock to the senses in all the right ways. And beyond the presentation, the game itself is just fun, being a brief adventure that's jam-packed with turn-based RPG combat and spectacular musical tracks. The game will only take you somewhere around 6 hours to complete, and probably less if you're not so concerned with seeing every dialogue string as I was. A good amount of your time will be spent in combat, triggered by random encounters as you run through areas. Your enemies are an assortment of corporate lackeys, virtual constructs, and riffraff, all of whom are prime fodder to be taken down behind your surprisingly in-depth scope of skills. Beyond operating on a traditional weakness/resistance triangle, you get a lot of say in how Noah actually lays a beatdown. You purchase skills referred to as software from the shop and then have a certain amount of RAM with which to slot them in, making them available in combat. Your RAM is limited, so it's a good thing that you can make use of the cache and install commands to protect yourself and swap skills while in combat if need be. You also get some hardware bonuses which act as passives that increase stats in place of traditional equipment. It's a simplistic format, but one that works well. The bosses provide some nice flavor in the way that they frequently have specific tactics, and each software skill increases in level and potency as you use them, rewarding you for taking your time to uncover what enemies might be weak to and possessing a wide selection of abilities. There's even a limit break attack, aptly named Jack moves, which are tons of fun to use. Not necessarily because they have a party game-esque series of inputs which can be entered to increase the damage, but more so because they look awesome. It's rare to see shorter titles make use of turn-based combat in this way, and there is a very good reason for that. With such a short runtime, there isn't much, if any, opportunity for the more intricate aspects afforded by the medium to shine, which unfortunately turns out to be the case in Jack Move. At face value, the combat is fun, but looking a bit deeper and you start to realize that the level, stat, and skill progression, as well as the install and hardware systems, never get the chance to mean much or be used to any real effect. The way in which a lot of enemies are just palette swaps of each other doesn't help much either. Because of this, it can get a bit repetitive more quickly than you would probably like. Most every random encounter boils down to figuring out which moves are most effective against whatever type of enemy you're pitted against, and then using said abilities ad nauseum until you win. Like I said, there's a reason short games aren't typically turn-based. It isn't really Jack Move's fault that it never gets the chance to pull itself out of this rut. That's a shame too, because what is here makes you yearn that the game was longer so that you could get the chance to use and analyze these features more critically. However, the game does come packed with some accessibility features that can keep you trucking along if you find things getting too tedious for your liking. You can adjust the rate of encounters in any given area on the fly down to removing them outright, and even remove the need to complete inputs for Jack moves. They're small things, but the game is unquestionably made better by their inclusion. Speaking of things that make the game better by their inclusion, the music. Composed by Charlie Fiber, also known by the name of Fracture, the score shifts between upbeat and elegant, heard in the city tracks, with particular note given to the piece for Uncle Gwen's Bar, and seedy and atmospheric depending on the situation. Regardless of how they're used, they do a phenomenal job of setting the mood and further engrossing you in wherever you are or what you're doing. It's a little techno, a little synthwave, a little contemporary, and it's all ear candy. Easily worth grabbing a copy of for listening outside of the game. The production is pristine, and many of the tracks are such earworms that it's tough to stop spinning them. This game is a shining example of why, when possible, entertainment media should look to present what's expected in a new way. I've got nothing against the classic way of doing things. Tropes and themes develop because we, as an audience, connect with them in a certain way. But when you take that leap and dare to subvert expectations, you unlock the ability to create a truly unique experience. Jack Move does not look like most other Cyberpunk titles, but it hits the requisite marks all the same, and it's because of how it looks that it stands out from the bunch. Jack Move is a fun little game, and one that clearly had a lot of time and care put into it. It may have been better served with a different form of gameplay, but if you ask me, the experience that it delivers more than makes up for it. If you're a Cyberpunk fan, give it a chance. I'd bet you'll be surprised at how well it can convey what it does given its appearance.